All right, guys, welcome. Appreciate all you guys being there. Looking forward to spending this time. Hopefully, this hour and a half, half hour, however long you're able to stay. Hopefully, it goes by pretty quick. I hope that you get a lot of good information from today's presentation. As you know, this is brought to you by Transform Lifestyle Medicine Alliance. And if you haven't checked out our website in a while, at the end, I'm going to go and I'm going to show you some of the great things. Isabella and some team members have been doing some really great stuff with posting videos. We've posted all of our presentations we've ever done. So if you've just started coming to presentations recently, you have years of presentations now that we have updated. So a special kudos to Isabella for updating those so we could get those on the site. So today's presentation is Your Body in Balance. All right, so Your Body in Balance. At first, when I got it, I was thinking it was all just women's health. And I was like, all right, it's women's health, all right? But needless to say, it's not. Once I really kind of got into it, I realized that it's both male and female, and it has a lot of really good information. So a quick introduction into the book. This author that wrote the book, his name's Dr. Neil Barnard. He runs the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine out of DC area. And he is a pioneer in the field of lifestyle medicine. He's incredible. He started his traditional medical residency like every other doctor, and then he found that they weren't really looking at the causes of problems. They were simply just diagnosing and treating. And he got to do a lot of unique things, from working in morgues to really kind of doing all kinds of exploratory research. And he found that the body has an innate ability to really heal itself. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about everything from fertility to hormones to men's health, women's health, and everything in between. And it's a really good read. If you're interested in getting a good book, if any of you want to borrow mine, you're happy to borrow mine. But it's a really good book, easy read, very simple and practical. So what I want to challenge all of you guys to do is to really kind of listen in for the themes. What are the themes that you're going to be seeing and hearing as we're going through the presentation? You're going to see a lot of overlap. So essentially, I'm going to kind of go piece by piece with the different topics. Just kind of give you the bullets of what is the proven research for this area or for that area. But what I want you to do is listen in for the theme that you're seeing with the corresponding behaviors. But I also want you to go through and take a look to the things that you may be struggling with, or areas that you say, I could do that. I could do better in this area or that area. So try to take a personalized approach to it. I don't want everybody looking at this presentation and saying, okay, yes, it's just general. Make it specific to you, because that's where you're going to be able to get your real maximum benefit here. So what we'll do is we'll go through the presentation. If you guys have questions at any time, please stop me and we'll talk about it right then and there with each of the areas. And then if you also have any questions or want to stay after at the end, I'm happy to talk through any of the slides, the materials, but also what you can do and any support we can provide with Transform at the end. All right, so again, this is an overview of the book, Your Body in Balance, and it's a really catchy book, catchy title, but it's all about food, hormones, and health. But it does also touch on other lifestyle behaviors other than food. But this is one of those things that it dives into each topic, and it shares all kinds of case studies and testimonials, which to me, a lot of researchers might say, oh, anecdotal evidence doesn't matter. But for me, as a health professional and educator, anecdotal evidence matters. If person A is here and they do these things and they're now here, to me, that means a lot. And they share a lot of incredible stories. And I'll try to remember some of them as we go through the slides so you guys can see and hear the good news of lifestyle. You know, what I don't want you to think is I don't want you to think, oh, I have this because I have a family history. I don't want you to have that type of thinking. I want you to challenge that and say, there's more to it than that. All right, so let's dive in. So fertility issues, as we've all kind of grown into adults, we've seen that this is more and more of a challenge. There's a lot of folks around us that have struggled with fertility, whether it be coming from the male side or the female side. And what we have to understand here is that, again, if you go to a fertility doctor, oftentimes they're not concerned about nutrition. They're not concerned about lifestyle. They may or may not be concerned about weight. Say, okay, well, if you're at an increased weight, you may struggle with this or struggle with that. But what I want you to understand here is that there's an opportunity for you to really address your lifestyle and to really say, okay, what can I do? So again, as we go through each of the different slides, I want you to consider what are the themes that are beneficial. And what you'll see in all the different slides is there's core behaviors that really all of us should strive to work towards. Some of us might strive there for fertility reasons. Some of us might strive there for men's health, women's health, whatever it might be, but it's just something that I want you to consider. Okay, so what are some things we can do here? First and foremost, we want to trim our excess body fat. Sorry, I'm just trying to shift my screen here a little bit. So we want to trim excess body fat. So when we have extra body weight, okay, so remember when our body's storing fat, it's doing what we're telling it to do. It's actually an okay thing that our body stores fat. It's there for a reason. But what we have to understand is when we have excess body fat, it carries additional hormones. So it increases the hormones in your body by having the extra body fat, okay? So it's something that we wanna work off. We don't have to be like we're on the cover of Shape Magazine or Muscle and Fitness. We just wanna try to get to a healthy way to maintain it as best we can, okay? And then I'll get to this a little bit later, but keep excess hormonal activity in check. So a lot of this has to do with our hormonal process. And when we're looking at our body and how everything works, this is something that we want to be mindful of. And I'll get back to that acronym there a little bit later. We want to eat plenty of fiber. Okay, so fiber is our friend. All right, remember that, F and F. Fiber is our friend. Fiber is the nutrient that we should all be talking about. Americans are so obsessed with protein. Protein, protein, protein. We need to be obsessed with fiber. Fiber, fiber, fiber. Fiber is incredible at actually taking and exposing or disposing of a lot of hormones. Okay, so it has the ability to kind of act as the cleaner. It gets and it disposes of a lot of hormones. Our body naturally has hormones that do all kinds of incredible things, but when we have excess, it causes a lot of challenges. When it comes to dairy products, we want to try to avoid them. We do a lot of presentations, and there's a common theme that dairy products do nobody any good. All right, they cause a lot of issues. All right, and we'll see that as a theme throughout a lot of the topics today. But we want to avoid them because they're very high in fat, very high in saturated fat. Also pretty high in calories. The hormones themselves that come from the dairy products are huge. Keep in mind that when we're consuming dairy products, we're consuming milk of a pregnant lactating cow. So we have to understand there that, again, cow's milk, the proteins and all the hormones that are in it, they cause all kinds of challenges. So some people might say, well, those hormones might help you get pregnant, but essentially the hormones that we get from dairy and cow's milk are not beneficial to our body at all. And then also because of the galactose that are within those dairy products as well. So again, we'll come back to healthy eating a little bit later in regards to what it is. And I think a lot of you already know the answer, but it's a diet consisting of mostly plants. Whether you eat all or a little bit, it's consuming and circling your plate around plant-based foods. All right, so next thing is tackling pain and PMS. And as I was reading this chapter and looking at this, I was like, yes, women are definitely going to want to hear what a male has to say about pain and PMS. But needless to say, it affects us guys too. I say that jokingly, but no, obviously we're sympathetic and we understand the challenges that come with it. But here are some recommendations for all women to consider when it comes to considering that. If you have pain or you have certain challenges during your cycle, something to be mindful of. So again, a common theme here again is to avoid animal products. It has been known to actually cause more and more pain for women because of all the things that are within the animal products. So I'm trying to get away from all the science as to why, and I really just want you to see the theme on, okay, what do I do? If I have really bad menstrual pain, what do I do to make it better? So the next thing is, again, keeping that fiber high in the diet. The average American, we should be getting at least 40 grams of fiber a day. All right, so if we're constipated, we need more fiber. Okay, if we want a healthier overall life and body, we need more fiber. Plus, fiber is satisfying, it's filling, and the more fiber we eat, the less of the high fat or high sugar type processed food, that type of thing that we eat as well. We want to keep oils low. Try to make it to where when you're eating out, that's really the only time you eat oil. All right. Try not to cook with oil in your house. It doesn't matter whether it's extra virgin olive oil or extra virgin olive oil, it's still pure fat. It's 4,000 calories a pound. And it actually ends up, that addition of the fat ends up causing additional pain, and it affects your cycle as well. A lot of research is showing more and more that the fat content of our diets in America is anywhere from 30, 40, 50%. We need to get that down around 10%. Not saying we have to track it, but if we eat a certain way, fat is naturally a lot lower. We also want to go through and consider eating plant protein rich foods, especially soy type foods that include tofu, tempeh, soy milk, things like that. Unfortunately, people might not like this recommendation, but when it comes to pain and PMS, there's been a lot of clinical research that shows that sugar and chocolate are not your friend. All right. They might taste incredible on the way in, but when it comes to PMS and menstrual pain, it actually causes a lot of wreaks a lot of havoc. Same thing goes with caffeine and alcohol. We might want that caffeine to get us through the day and give us that energy, or we might want the alcohol to kind of de-stress, wind down from the day. However, when it comes to pain and PMS, these have been found to have detrimental effects on this. Additionally, folks that aren't consuming or don't get enough B12 in their day-to-day diet, whether it be through food, fortified foods, or through supplementation of vitamins and minerals, you want to make sure that you're getting B12 as well. And then the non-food related things when it comes to pain and PMS are exercise, sleep, and sunlight. We need to get outside, all right? Right now, especially if we're trapped inside, we're on a computer all day, we need to get outside. We might not be outside as much as we normally would be, but we need to be conscious, especially wherever we are, to get outside, go for a walk, just sit there and let the sun hit your face, and get the vitamin D and get all the natural body boosters as a result. And then one thing that I want to call out that the author said with a lot of research is you can't do a couple things here. Like if you really are struggling with this area, his recommendation and what they've seen from all their clinical research is go 100% in. Don't teeter and be like, well, I cut out caffeine or I cut out oil. Like really consider going all in just to see. And then what you'll notice is as you bring in certain things month after month, you might say, okay, well, this month I drank a lot of oil or I consumed a lot of oil and it affected my cycle, or I had a lot of caffeine or alcohol and it affected it. So it's just something to consider here when it comes to pain and our premenstrual cycle. All right. So now a big topic in regards to cancer for women. So we're going to talk about women and we're going to talk about men right after. But what we have to understand here is that when we're looking at this, we want to consider the fact that there's a lot of similarities. What's good for a woman is good for a man and vice versa for the most part. So there's a lot of similarities there. But bottom line, when it comes to a woman, if you say, I want to prevent cancer, some of you may or may not have already had cancer in your life, but this is something that is the second leading cause of death in the entire world. All right. So this is a big deal. Cancer has become more and more common. And a lot of research and trending is showing that 1 out of every 2, 1 out of 3 people in our lifetime are going to have cancer. And that to me is unacceptable. We have to focus on prevention. And we have to say, well, what causes cancer? And then we have to avoid those things and minimize those things. So the first thing is avoid animal products. Second thing is avoid added oils. Then this is a really important thing when you think of eating. You want to eat in color. You want to eat as many colors as possible. So when you go in the produce aisle, be like have a challenge and be like, let's see if I can get every one of the primary colors. Get yellow, get orange, get green, get red. Go through and incorporate all the different colors because they all are full of antioxidants and all kinds of nutrients and vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals. The more color, the better. And keep in mind, if you like onions, a red onion has more cancer-fighting chemicals than a white onion. Okay, a purple cabbage has more than a white cabbage. So when you have options, always understand that the color is better. We want to eat as much color as possible. And we want to make sure we're eating cruciferous vegetables. They're cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale. Eat as many cruciferous vegetables as you can. be one of those people that when you get a salad, people are like, oh my gosh, like, is that a family salad? Like get that much produce and vegetables and get it to be as colorful as possible. So there's a lot of mixed research, but I want to confirm something for you. The research that says that soy is bad for your health is actually not accurate. Okay, what we have to understand here is that soy is actually beneficial for both males and females. So don't be afraid of soy milk. Don't be afraid of soy products. We should consume soy because if we look at populations around the world, the higher the soy consumption, the lower the relative risk of cancer. Okay, so if you take countries like Japan, for example, very high soy intake, and they find that the isoflavones and all the different things in soy products are actually incredibly beneficial, and they serve as a very good preventive aspect for our health. Okay, so back to the fiber. We want to aim for 40 grams of fiber a day. Do you need to track it? No. If you want to, you can, but basically eat as many plants as you can, incorporate as many as you can, and you'll notice it's going to make a big difference in a lot of areas. Exercise, physical activity, this is something we want to try to incorporate. The recommendations are basically just move as often as you can, get out there, be physically active and exercise, but do the things you like. If you like walking and hiking, walk. Yeah, one time I had a lady say to me, oh, I'm not going to run unless somebody's chasing me or there's a fire. And I said, don't run then. You don't have to run. Just do something that you do in fact enjoy. And then, you know, I don't want to be a party pooper here, but when it comes to alcohol, with cancer research, it's important to understand that alcohol is a carcinogen, which means it's a cancer-causing compound. So when it comes to alcohol for both males and females, the less the better, all right? Not always fun to hear, you know, everybody I'm sure enjoys, you know, a glass of wine or two or a couple beers, but what we have to understand, the less the better when it comes to cancer prevention. Okay, it's a primary risk factor for breast cancer, especially. Breast cancer is one of the most common forms of cancer for women, and it's highly linked to higher alcohol consumption. And then we need to avoid chemical exposure, whether it be chemicals in our foods, in our products. Chemicals are great for a lot of reasons, right? They might increase shelf life, they might go through and, you know, do things with certain products, but what we have to understand, chemicals are not good for us. They're not good to be in us. They're not good to be on our skin or in our products. They're touching us. And even something I'll talk about a little bit later with avoiding harmful chemicals, even something like a receipt. You know, they use certain types of receipts and it has chemicals on it. So every time you're touching a receipt, actually it has such a high dose amount of this product. I'm forgetting what it is right now, but it seeps into your skin every time you touch it. So just little things like that we don't consider. And then lastly, B12, you'll see that there. B12 is important for everybody. A lot of times you'll Google B12 and plant-based diets, and it shows that it's incredibly important that we consume it. But actually every American adult needs to be consuming B12. So this is a message to all of us, is that we all should be striving to get B12 into our diet. You can either take a small dose daily, it's just a little small chewable, or you can go through and take one like myself, once every week I take a 2,500 microgram. All right, so similar things for men, because keep in mind, it's much easier to prevent something than it is to treat something. So keep in mind, the key word with cancer is we want to prevent it. If God forbid we end up dealing with it, we want to try to treat it as naturally as possible before we go to the harmful, more challenging things like chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. But same thing, we want to avoid animal products. We want to minimize the use of added oils. We want to go through and consider things like lycopene. That comes from our red fruits and vegetables. Things like tomatoes are very high in lycopene, watermelon, all kinds of red fruits and vegetables. Soy products. A lot of research is trying to scare guys out there saying, guys, stay away from soy products. It has hormones in it. And you're gonna grow breasts and you're gonna have all kinds of women problems. And it's just not accurate. It's really not. The research shows that soy is beneficial for both males and females. So men, it is tough to eat tofu, all right? Don't feel like a sissy. I eat tofu all the time and I still feel plenty tough and masculine, all right? So eat the soy products, drink the soy milk, and just know that it's good for you. Okay, and then again, fiber. When we consider what healthy eating is, we want to eat the plants. We want to eat the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, and the legumes, the beans, the peas, the lentils. The more fiber, the more plants we eat, the more protective our body is. So even if you still decide to eat dairy products or eggs or animal products, I would recommend, even if you do want to consume them, consume less of them. But what I would challenge you to do is to try to make the majority of what you do matter. All right. Make the 90% of you being on point with healthy eating, all kinds of really good stuff. So that way, on the other end, if you have chicken every now and then, or, occasional cheese pizza, you know that it's not what you do all the time. You know that it's something you do some of the time. All right, now PCOS. So this is polycystic ovarian.
Steve, can I just interject something, or ask more of kind of a statement than anything like that? So I'm in the chemical industry, and so you mentioned on the other part about women, and on the slide before that, you don't need to go back to it. So you mentioned the things on receipt. There's inks that go into those receipts, and they're bad for you to get in. A lot of those are water-based, but they can be solvent-based, so those are bad. Think about paint, especially people that they're working with any kind of paint. Most of those are latex or water-based. For the most part, it's okay. It's not going to necessarily give you cancer over long-term exposure. One of the things that I always kind of circle back to is Tupperware and plastics that all have the BPA in them. And yes, they're safe and they're proven safe and things like that. But I've tried to get myself in the habit for several years now of, when we go to microwave some of your dishes, any of your food, to reheat food or something like that, take them out of your Tupperware rather than cranking them up for a couple, 2 or 3 minutes, put them in your glass bowls. Because while the plastic is rated, the BPA is rated okay with, storage and things like that. When you crank the heat up on those, then you have the potential for having some other releases, and that's all in your food and everything. So again, just something else to think about on the chemical side. And it goes without saying, anytime you're using any type of chemicals, around the house, it's maybe more for the men than the women. Gloves and any protection you can do to help yourself is always a good idea.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Ron. And you must have read this book, or you just might be knowledgeable in this area because of your field, right? But we're going to talk about BPA at the end of the presentation and talk about that. And that's actually one of the recommendations. If you're gonna consume or use plastic products, be mindful to never heat them up, to never heat a plastic container up. What we have to consider there is transport it into a glass dish. Some might say, okay, it's microwave safe, but it might be safe to be used, but it doesn't mean it's safe for you, the person. So it's something that we have to consider. So that's a great point there. And we'll circle back to that at the end. I appreciate you sharing that. All right, now PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So this is something that, by no means am I an expert on this at all, but I have known some folks through the year that have struggled with this. And what's really important here to understand is some people might say, oh, it's just genetic. Now, granted, there might be a genetic component. A mom might have struggled with PCOS, and then a daughter might have struggled with it as well. But what we have to understand is it doesn't mean that this person did it, this person gets it, there's nothing we can do. There's a lot of research showing that things like PCOS, it can get significantly better, or completely, you can get rid of it completely if you really make enough lifestyle changes.
Steve, what is PCOS?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it's essentially, I have the definition here. I knew that we would talk about it. Let me see. So the definition here is, it's a hormonal disorder common among women of reproductive age. Women with PCOS may have infrequent or prolonged menstrual periods or excess male hormones. So they have excess androgen levels, and then their ovaries may develop small collections of fluid follicles, and oftentimes they don't release eggs as a result of these challenges. So it's something that has become more common. It doesn't affect most women. However, it is something that essentially their body it has this challenge. But again, what doctors like Neil Barnard are doing, or they're saying, well, let's look at lifestyle. Let's look at the causes that could be happening. And the recommendations here on the screen you'll see are similar to a lot of the others, is that what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're controlling our blood sugar as well. So that was surprising to me that blood sugar played a role. I don't know exactly how it does, but you want to make sure that your hormones are in check, but your blood sugar is being managed and taken care of as well. So the recommendation they had for that, to keep your blood sugar low, and we'll talk about tackling diabetes, the recommendations are essentially the same. The 3-part thing for anybody that's struggling with PCOS or diabetes is to avoid animal products, to either severely limit them or avoid them completely, to avoid fatty foods and added oils. In America, like I mentioned earlier, they tell Americans 30% of your calories should come from fat. A lot of research is showing that's actually not the case. We are over consuming fat. And a good thing to remember about fat is the fat you eat is the fat you wear. All right. So if you like having a lot of body fat, eat plenty of fat. If you don't, eat a little bit less, and it will certainly help you out there. And then we want to favor low glycemic index foods. You guys, you may be familiar with this, but essentially your glycemic index is when you're consuming foods, it has a certain level of your spike. So it's the ability and the absorption rate at which your body experiences. So for example, if you eat an orange, it has a lower glycemic index than drinking orange juice because it's been refined and processed. Your blood sugar levels are going to spike more with orange juice compared to an orange. Same thing with apples, apple juices. Same things with sweet potatoes versus white potatoes. Sweet potatoes have a lower glycemic index than a white potato. Both helpful, but if you're trying to really keep your glycemic index lower, it's something to consider. And then in regards to PCOS, one of the key things there was really getting to and maintaining a healthy weight. That really kind of came into it. And then just all in all, a lot of the other recommendations that are there. But bottom line, oftentimes they'll look at it and say, okay, this person is PCOS, there's nothing we can do. And what they're finding more and more research, and it's growing, but what they've seen so far is that your lifestyle can in fact make a significant difference and even potentially reverse and get rid of PCOS. All right, now menopause. So now one thing that we need to understand with menopause here is that they oftentimes are looking at it like it's a condition, you know? It's like, oh, okay, you're 50, you're 55, you have menopause, and it's like, you're diagnosed with menopause. And it's like, no. Let's clarify this. Menopause is a natural stage of life. All right. So news alert, it is not a condition. Doctors try to really go through it and make it a condition. The reason being, because if it's a condition, they want to prescribe a medication or hormone replacement therapy or other things like that. So stay away from that and say, no, thank you. This is natural. You know, you have certain years where women can become pregnant and then that closes. So the door opens, the door closes. It's perfectly natural and it's a natural part of life. Don't fall for the lies that you need to do this or fix that, or you need something crazy to make you whole again or to fix your challenges that you're going through. A lot of good research again has shown that plant-based diets are incredibly beneficial for women with that are experiencing menopause. So when they get to that phase, when women are consuming a mostly or all plant-based diet leading up to menopause, then instead of it being a major speed bump, it's kind of like a slight challenge. You know, they might go through and have more minor types challenges and problems. And this is kind of unique. And I've talked with women, and it's not really one of my favorite things to talk to women about, but essentially some women have said, oh, menopause was crazy intense. And some women say it was insignificant. It really didn't have a lot of crazy challenges and effects. So what we need to understand there is that for all women, we need to consider again, or something that you can consider is how do you want that to look for you? And one thing I will tell you in regards to menopause and menstrual cycles and in the span of women's life, that women in countries that are high dairy consuming countries like America, females get their cycle way earlier. All right, way earlier. They might get their cycle at 10 or 11 or 12. Okay, you look at that compared to a non-dairy consuming female, she might not get her period or her cycle until 15, 16, 17. So what happens is the cycle starts way early. And then on the back end, for those high dairy consuming females, menopause happens way later. And it has to do with the hormones that comes from the cow's milk. It comes from all those products that are playing a role in our hormonal health. So anyway, just side note, when I first heard that, I thought, wow, that's incredible. But again, you don't see it on the news. You don't see this information being shared out there, but it's something certainly that you need to consider. So we've talked about soy products. We've talked about extra weight, plant-based diets, but something here to consider is you want to avoid hormone replacement therapy. All right, you want to avoid it. Some of you may have already went through some certain things with this, but you want to avoid it. A lot of research shows that it's incredibly harmful to females' health. It is not a good thing. It might make your challenges and hot flashes and hormonal symptoms a little bit better, but what you need to understand is it carries a lot of risks. Okay, so when it comes to certain things, just because they can do things doesn't mean you should do things. All right. So when it comes to this, really take a good hard look at that and say, no, thank you. You know, look at your lifestyle and say, how can I do this better without increasing my risk of cardiovascular disease and certain types of cancer? All right. So a lot of research back when hormone replacement therapies came out, they said, well, women naturally see a decline in estrogen, so we'll just give them more estrogen so it's not as big of a change. But again, your body's doing that for a reason. So it's kind of like when you have a slight fever, you shouldn't go on a fever reducer. Your body's actually has a fever to fight something. So what we have to understand is we don't need to go against our body all the time. Sometimes we need to just kind of stand back, let it do what it naturally does, but change our lifestyle as best we can. Okay, so moving ahead. So ED, another fun topic. Now this topic, that might sound weird, but this is a topic that I don't mind talking to guys about as much as talking about PMS with women, is that ED is the first sign of cardiovascular disease oftentimes. Okay, so when a guy goes to the doctor and their head's down and they're sad and they have to tell their doctor, hey doc, it's not working. Okay, it's a very challenging thing for a guy to go into a doctor and say that. And typically what the doctor does is they say, okay, well, we can give you some pills for ED. What the doctor should do right away is send them for more tests, because that is the first sign of cardiovascular disease. Oftentimes, this is the first sign that men are struggling with cardiovascular disease. Okay, so what we have to understand is it comes down to blood flow. Blood flow, that's the key here. So same thing that helps your heart, helps your organs, all right? So what we have to understand here is that the arteries that go to our heart are very, very large. The primary arteries are very large. Some of the arteries like in the private area are much smaller. So what we have to understand here is it might not be a big straw carrying blood. It might be a tiny little coffee straw type, or way even smaller than that. So what needs to happen is you need sufficient blood flow. You need those arteries to dilate and you need blood to flow through it so you can get blood and oxygen, okay? So what we have to understand here is that the same thing that is good for cardiovascular disease is good for erectile dysfunction, all right? So this is really an incredible finding that the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want to tell people to switch to a plant-based diet and open up their arteries. They want them to live the way they are, but they want them to take a pill. So essentially, the reason why you know that this works is if you consider what ED medications do, they dilate the arteries to increase that blood flow and oxygen. Your body naturally does that if you live and focus on healthy lifestyles. So key recommendations: plant-based diet, moderate exercise, manage our stress as best we can, and avoid smoking. All of those things will help open up your arteries and increase blood flow. So keep in mind, everybody should be considering that these 4 things are good for heart health for every single one of us. The benefit here is that it also improves ED for males as well. All right, now when it comes to diabetes, this is an incredible finding and research and application here. And I can tell you this, so there's 2 types of diabetes. So what we have to understand here is that type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. So an autoimmune disorder means that your body has attacked itself. All right, we have an immune system to identify pathogens and attack those. But when it attacks itself, there's something that happened, right? So oftentimes our healthy cells, get kind of damaged in the crossfire, right? So imagine guns shooting, they're trying to take over and get rid of these unhealthy cells, but oftentimes some healthy cells get damaged as a result. So that's essentially what happens with type 1 diabetes. Our body attacks its own pancreas. So our body attacks the pancreas, which makes the insulin ineffective, or it makes it to where our our pancreas does not produce sufficient or insulin at all. So these diabetics are called type 1 diabetics, insulin dependent diabetics. These folks can never get rid of diabetes, all right, but they can lessen the amount of insulin that they'll be dependent on. So the good news is all the things we're talking about and all the things we're going to talk about here with type 2 diabetes, if a type 1 diabetic does that, it will decrease their insulin need. So they might take 10 units of insulin a day. They switch to a plant-based diet. They start doing certain things. They might drop to 2 or 3 or 4 units of insulin a day, which is a really good thing. And when it comes to conquering type 2 diabetes, the same thing we talked about earlier with PCOS and monitoring and taking care of blood sugar is we have to consider the fact that we need to avoid animal products and we need to lessen them. They're full of fat and full of protein. And oftentimes, there's no carbohydrates in them, there's no fiber in them, and there's something that literally the fat gets in our bloodstream and right away, it causes challenges and wreaks havoc on our cardiovascular system. Number 2 is we got to keep oils to a minimum. Number 3 is we need to consider the glycemic index foods. And there's some examples there that you can see. So there's some options. So if you can consider eat this versus that, it's certainly something to consider. So what I want to tell you guys about diabetes, and I want you to understand here that when somebody says, I have diabetes, I can't eat carbohydrates, tell them, say, all right, I got good news for you. I got really good news for you. The opposite is true. Don't avoid carbohydrates. Minimize the fat in your diet. That's what every person with diabetes should be told. Now, here's why. Fat gets in the muscle cells. So what happens is, let's say we go through and somebody eats a banana. Okay, they eat a banana. The body metabolizes and digests that food. The sugar from the banana enters our bloodstream as blood glucose. Okay, so it's sugar in our blood. And what happens is our body uses that. It sends the glucose all throughout our body to all of our cells. But here's what happens. When we have extra blood glucose, our body stores the extra glucose in the muscle cells as glycogen. And the thing that it needs is it needs insulin. So when you have extra blood sugar, the pancreas releases insulin, that it joins that sugar and it takes it and stores it in the muscle cell. Have you ever heard the term carb load, carbohydrate load? Essentially, that's what's happening. We're storing sugar in our muscle cells for later use. So here's what you have to understand. It's like the insulin is the key, but when you go, it goes to open up the cell, there's fat inside the cell. It's called intramyocellular lipid. And that fat inside the cell decreases the insulin, it increases insulin resistance, which means that's essentially what's causing your sugar not to be stored. So when they diagnose or when they say type 2 diabetes is characterized by persistently high blood sugar, what they're not talking about is the fact that type 2 diabetes is when your body is insulin resistant. But what we need to understand here is it comes down to a high fat diet. Fat on our body and fat on our plate essentially is what's going to cause the body's challenges as it relates to regulating blood sugar. All right. So when somebody says, I can't eat carbohydrates, tell them, say, no, you need to try to eliminate and eat less fats in your diet, not the sugar. All right. So when you see somebody at a party and they're eating the ham and cheese and they're leaving the bread on their plate, tell them to switch it. Eat the bread, leave the ham and cheese if you want to better manage your diabetes. Any questions about diabetes? I know this is a big one, and I know we all know folks that struggle with diabetes, but any questions from anybody on diabetes or anything that I just mentioned there? All right, I'll take that as no. All right, so let's jump ahead here. So the next thing is our thyroid. So when we look at our thyroid, what we have to understand here is that our thyroid is an organ, all right? And here's the definition, just so you know. So it releases hormones that control metabolism, okay? Which is the way our body uses energy. So it has to do with our metabolism. So what we have to understand here is there's things that can cause it to go wrong. And some of the things that are recommended based off of the research are these that you see here on the screen. So one thing is that iodine and things like sodium are things we need in our diet. So iodine is something that is beneficial to our thyroid. So you might think, really, why is iodine there? I don't exactly know all the details behind that, but what I will tell you is what the author recommends is to consider having iodized salt. So if you go and get salt, you may want to make sure and see that it says iodized, because it means that it has iodine in it. But also you can get iodine from sea plants. So for example, if you go through and eat nori or wakame, those things have really good iodine in them. And it's something that, to me, it's a little fishy tasting, obviously, because it comes from the ocean. My wife and kids eat it like it's a cracker, and I think it's so weird. But needless to say, it is something that is actually good for us and beneficial for a lot of reasons. And then the second thing when it comes to a healthy thyroid, again, is avoiding animal products. So more and more research show that animal products, whether it be coming from meat, dairy, or eggs, affect both ends, which is really strange, that it can cause hypothyroid and hyperthyroid. So it's essentially, it can cause your metabolism to go haywire either way. So it's just something to consider, the fact that these things, they're being found more and more to wreak havoc on all kinds of challenges throughout our body. All right, now when it comes to the next
Steve,
one,
Steve,
yes,
question.
yes, great.
What do you do if you're allergic to iodine? You can't eat iodine.
I'm not sure on that one. I'll have to take that and look at that. But it would be something to ask. So let me see here. I'll write a note and I'll see. I'm sure that there's other ways that you can get it or get what you need. Have you ever been deficient? Has your doctor ever said that you're deficient or anything on that one?
No, but you know, that's what a shellfish allergy is. It's really an allergy to iodine. At least that's what I discovered for myself.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look into that and I'll get back to you. I'm not quite sure on that. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Okay.
All right, so healthy skin and healthy hair. Something we all want. All right, we absolutely want it, whether we're male or female. We want to have nice, thick, full hair, right? And what we also want to do is we want to have the best skin we can possible. And one thing I can tell you is, just from personal experience, from people that I've worked with, it's incredible the benefits that people see in their skin when they switch to a plant-based diet. It's honestly incredible. I've had students that were on acne medication, switched to a plant-based diet, and literally avoided the oil products as much as they could, and they got off all their acne medicine and their skin cleared up. And it's incredible to think that your diet can affect that. But so here are some tips to strengthen both your hair as well as improve your skin. Animal products we want to avoid. We want to stay away from the oils. If you do go to restaurants, see if they can customize things. See if you can ask for something without oil. Let's say you go and order pizza, and you know they cook the pizza, and then at the end they put olive oil all over it. Maybe ask them to hold it, or maybe ask them to do a light. Let's say you go to an Italian restaurant, and instead of dipping your bread in oil, ask for a little jar of sauce. Yes, there's probably oil in your sauce, but at least it's not straight oil. But consider what you can do when you are in fact eating out. But again, you want to avoid cooking with oil in your house. And then avoid oily foods. So oftentimes these foods are a little easy to overeat. So I'm sure we've all been, consuming peanut butter, and you're like, wow, this is incredible. It tastes so good, and you keep eating it. So what you want to consider here is that there's natural oil from the peanuts themselves. They're a high fat, legume, but what you have to understand here is, especially if they have added oil, they're going to be even harder to stop eating. But then even things like avocados are incredibly healthful, but you need to be mindful that they are a fatty food as well. So something to consider there. We want to avoid added sugars, which is really crazy. And I thought that this was crazy when I found this out, but when you consider added sugars, they said that a lot of anecdotal evidence was saying that the more sugary foods that people consume, now this isn't talking about fruits and natural foods, this is talking about more sugary, processed, refined sugar products, that it basically, they said, this is their quote, they made hair lifeless, which is crazy to me to think about. So the next time you're reaching for the candy and the Skittles, things like that, just consider the fact that sugar could be hurting your hair volume and fullness at the same time. And then again, we talked about having the plant-based products for protein. Make sure that you're incorporating a lot of those products into your diet. And then when it comes to fruits and vegetables, we all know that they're good for us. But one of the things we have to understand is they have antioxidants, and that helps protect our skin. So consider this, for example, if you take an apple, if you put an apple on your counter, nothing really happens to the apple, right? A couple hours, nothing happens. But if you cut a piece of apple off and you let it sit on your counter, what happens to the part that's exposed? Essentially, it oxidizes. All right, it starts getting brown. That's called oxidation. So what's inside of the outside of that apple it's full of antioxidants. Okay, so what we have to understand here is the antioxidants, when we consume those, they give us that benefit. It helps decrease oxidation in our body. So think of it like this. Think when you see a nice shiny new copper penny, you're like, wow, it's so clean. It's brand new. Over time, it gets rusty, it gets dirty. That's oxidation. All right. If you go and you pour, acid or soda or certain things on that, it serves as an antioxidant and it takes the oxidation off. So it's something to understand that this happens everywhere in our body, but it's especially our skin. So one of the things that oftentimes the more fruits and vegetables you consume, people might often start to say you're like glowing. Your skin has a lot more color because of the fact that you're getting all these different nutrients, you're getting all these incredible plant-based chemicals and nutrients and antioxidants that actually have a really beneficial effect. Another thing is when it comes to sun use, we need to be mindful for excess sun exposure for certainly things like skin cancer, but we need to understand that the more we expose ourselves to a lot of excess sun, the quicker our skin will age and the more damage happens to our skin. All right, so it's something to consider there. If you are a sun lover and sun worshiper, your skin certainly is going to have more challenges than maybe if you go out, you get a fair amount, you use sunblock when needed, but you're more sensitive and aware that you don't want to burn and you don't want excess. All right, another thing, obviously, and I think you guys probably know this, but when it comes to skin, using tobacco products are not helpful for your skin. All right, they're incredibly harmful for your skin. They will age you way faster. Okay, so it's something to understand here that if any of you have ever smoked in the past, you might have seen that quick aging process. But the good news is you can slow that aging process now by following some of these tips. And then again, a healthful diet overall is incredible for so many different reasons. Okay, so foods and moodiness and mood. When I was at Chrysler, which is now the Star campus on the University of Delaware, I was 20 years old, and it was my first job away from home, away from my mom's daycare. And I saw a sign there that said, "A better mood is just a short walk away." And I kind of like laughed at it, like, yeah, like that would work. And then I tried it. Whenever I wasn't feeling the best, I'd kind of be like, all right, let me try it. Let me walk for 15 minutes and see how I feel. So, and I'm kind of jumping down the bottom there, but that comes to mind for me first and foremost is whenever you need that little bit of a mood boost, get moving. Go for a walk, go for a bike ride, get outside, do some physical activity, and oftentimes it's going to really make a big difference in your health. All right, so let's talk about some of these things. Again, you're seeing the themes here. We want to avoid animal products. We want to favor high fiber foods. We want to keep oils low, keep eating the plant protein, avoid the sugar and chocolate. So same thing like we talked about earlier with the pain and the PMS, the menstrual pain and PMS. Sugar and chocolate might taste incredible on the way in, but they have lasting effects on our body. Same thing goes with caffeine and alcohol. If you ever want to put this to the test, take a regular coffee drinker's coffee away and see what happens. They're not very happy, right? It's something that we all have to understand that sometimes, even if we're a really happy person, we might notice a mood shift when we're consuming caffeine, maybe when we have kind of a withdrawal or a letdown where we feel like we need it or we're craving it. It's something that for me in my life, I've noticed that caffeine consumption, chocolate, sugar, alcohol has certainly affected my mood, just whether it be, after or the next day or whatever it might be. So again, B12 daily, you're seeing that theme come throughout. B12 is something that male, female, young, old, plant-based, meat eater, wherever you are, it's something that we all should be consuming. And then when it comes to exercise, like I mentioned, exercise is incredible for boosting your mood. So remember that sign. a short walk is, or a better mood is just a short walk away. A better mood is a short walk away. So remember that next time you're frustrated, or you got in an argument or a beef with somebody, take a walk. Be like, I'll be back. Go for a walk, get outside, get some fresh air. Oftentimes you're going to come back and your mood's going to be that much better as a result. Now, the next one is huge when it comes to mood. And I'm sure we all can speak to times where we did not get enough sleep and it dramatically affected our mood. All right. What we have to consider here is we should all be aiming for 7 to 8, 7 to 9 hours per night. That's our goal. That's our target. 7 to 9 hours per night is what we should be shooting for sleep. Now, when it comes to not getting enough sleep, it makes our life way harder. And the quote that I always tell my students is the best way for a good tomorrow is a good night's sleep tonight. Okay, so when you're thinking about your day coming up the next day, consider the fact that if you make sleep a priority and you get enough of it and you get good quality sleep, your day is going to be that much better. We should not be going through our day yawning and tired and groggy and moody because we're not rested. We need to make sure we're getting enough sleep because it can dramatically affect our mood, and it better helps us deal with our stress. Okay, stress is something that, you know, we all have stressors in our life, whether it be work or relationships or finances or challenges, whatever our stressors, these things are all beneficial to really help us kind of manage our stress as best we can. And then the last thing, sunlight. When we get sunlight, we get vitamin D. Vitamin D is a natural mood booster, and vitamin D has so many benefits for us as people. A side note on vitamin D, especially as a result of COVID, the folks that are struggling more with COVID, a lot of research is showing that they are lower in vitamin D. And vitamin D is a protective thing for challenges like COVID or the flu or whatever it might be. So make sure you're getting your sunlight. All right, so overall, a healthy diet. And I know a lot of you guys are familiar with all the different presentations on healthy eating, whether it be coming from diabetes or heart disease or longevity or constipation, whatever it is, all things kind of point back to what really healthy eating is. And what we have to understand here is no matter whether it's high carb, low carb, whether it's this or whether it's that, the healthiest diets are those that are surrounded in primarily plant-based foods. Okay. So if you look at things like the blue zones, all the longest living, healthiest people around the world, what you'll find is there's a theme there. And the theme is that they are all eating mostly plant-based diets. Some might have a little bit of dairy, some might have a little bit of fish, some might have a little bit of alcohol. They have these different things, but the majority of them, all these centenarians, I mean, many people over 100 years old, they all ate a primarily plant-based diet, whether they were in Greece, whether they were in Loma Linda, California, whether they were in Okinawa, Japan, they all consumed a mostly plant-based diet. All right. So what that is the 4 food groups: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. You want to base your meals around that. So in the morning, it might be oatmeal with fruits, berries, bananas, some flaxseed, chia seed, maybe some maple syrup, some honey, all kinds of good, delicious things that are very full of fiber and incredibly beneficial. For lunch, it might be a big bowl of vegetable soup, it might be a big salad, it might be a big vegetable veggie burrito, it might be a wrap, it might be a big healthy sandwich. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that it's surrounded by plant-based foods. And then for dinner, it could be pasta, it could be chili, it could be, like for example, today we had sweet potatoes with chili on top. So like that to me it's incredible. And it has bean chili. It has all kinds of onions and beans and tomato sauces and natural healthful things. So it's something to consider here that when you go through and you switch to a more plant-based diet, you will see incredible benefits. So it's basically a 2-step process. The first thing you need to understand is just explore. Think, could I make this meal plant-based? Could I try a plant-based creamer? Could I try soy milk instead of whole milk or skim milk? Could I try a vegan cheese instead of this cheese? Could I try a vegan mayo instead of this? Instead of a meatball, could I have a veggie ball, right? As weird as that might sound. Whatever it is, like consider the possibilities, keeping in mind that the transition foods are oftentimes appealing. When you switch to a plant-based diet, a lot of times people are like, well, I'll have veggie hot dogs, I'll have veggie hamburgers, I'll have veggie beef, I'll have whatever it is. The less of those things you do, the better. But at first, you're just exploring. Just play around with an explorer. But once you're done your exploration phase, then go through and do it all in completely. Like the recommendation, go 100%. Go all in for 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, you then have the opportunity to say, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to have shrimp, every week, once a week? Do I want to have ice cream, on a Saturday night? Like, think of ways that you might want to incorporate it. But then what you're going to notice there is that when you go through and you have that dairy that you normally don't have, it might upset your belly. You might notice that you're a little more constipated, or you might notice that you're a little, your stomach's uneasy. You might go through and have that beef and you might notice, oh, it just didn't sit well with me. I have acid reflux. I have some indigestion. That's something that for me, I noticed even just consuming some candy in the Halloween season. Some of the things that that had dairy in it, I noticed that I kind of had like a little bit of reflux, and I haven't had that in years. I just felt the acidity, and to me, I think it was because it had dairy products that I don't consume. All right, so what do we do? Here are some helpful tips. Consider and think international. So when you're eating, don't think the standard American diet. Don't think steakhouse. All right, but even if you do, there's some things you can do there. But go through and think international. There's all kinds of plant-based options at Italian restaurants. There's incredible options at Mexican restaurants. So Italian, it might be a vegetable sauce. It might be loaded up with pasta and veggies and sauce. Forgetting what that's called, but they oftentimes call that something at an Italian restaurant. At a Mexican restaurant, it might be veggie fajitas. It might be veggie burritos, veggie tacos. Chinese, it can be basically all the different vegetables. If you want tofu, or they oftentimes call it bean curd, you can get vegetable protein. It's textured vegetable protein. It's really good. It takes the flavor just like any other chicken or beef would as well. Japanese, you can get sushi. Thai, you can get Thai curry and all kinds of vegetable-based dishes. Vietnamese, Korean, I mean, there's all kinds of good things. But bottom line, what's really neat is that we have so many different international cultures that have incredible plant-based options. Keep in mind, in America, a very low percentage of people eat plant-based diets. Around the rest of the world, very high percentage of people eat plant-based diets. So it's not uncommon for people in all countries around the world to consume a lot of plant-based foods. All right, so again, we talked about this a lot for a lot of the different areas, but we want to ask for oil-free foods. So if you're getting salad dressing, look for salad dressings without oil, or look for tomato sauces without oil, or go through and ask, do you cook this with oil? And just say, can you hold the oil? Oil is not healthy. All right, oil is not necessary. We've been kind of sold a lie that oil is necessary and it's heart healthy. Okay, pouring pure fat into our cardiovascular system is not healthy. Period. It's just not healthy. It slows our blood. It increases all kinds of our blood levels all throughout our cardiovascular system, and it's not good for us. Is oil better for you than animal fat? Yes. Olive oil is better for you than butter. Olive oil is better for you than the lard or the Crisco or whatever it might be. But just because it's less bad does not mean it's good. All right. So we want to be mindful of avoiding oil. And then if you go through and you eat out at restaurants like diners, for example, go through and be like, can I have a veggie omelet with rye toast, no butter, and hold the egg? Like, they'll look at you like you're crazy. Like, what do you mean? How's it an omelet? But again, you can honestly go through and just get a stir fry. Oftentimes I do this. I'll ask for a stir fry. Like a couple times I went to hotels and they had an omelet bar. And I kept telling the guy, can I just have potatoes and every vegetable you have with no oil? And 2 times he poured the egg on it and he had to throw the omelet away. And I was like, well, give it to somebody. But needless to say, it took him 3 times to really get over the fact that I did not want egg. I just had potatoes and vegetables, and it was really good. It was great. I had that. I had a side of bread, a side of fruit, and it was really, really tasty. But when in doubt, there's always some flexibility there to adapt your meals. And then if you go to a fast food restaurant, consider the fact that there's options. For example, you might go to Subway. We just did this recently, and we just basically, you ask for a salad on a sub roll. You can get all kinds of great things. Places like Subway even do have like veggie patties as well. But you can go through and load it up with peppers and onions and tomatoes and all kinds of really healthful things for you. And then whenever you go to, places, when in doubt, ask for veggie burgers. Consider the fact that they have baked potatoes. Like if you go to Wendy's, you can ask for a baked potato. If you go to Taco Bell, you can ask for a bean burrito. That's one of the things that we hadn't eaten at Taco Bell for a long time. And I'm not saying that we should all go to Taco Bell tomorrow. But what I'm saying is if you're out and about, Taco Bell is your friend if you're eating a plant-based diet. You can go there, get a $1 menu, you can get a $1 veggie burrito. And if you ask for it, I forget. Oh, they call it fresca. So if you don't want cheese or animal products, you say, can I have it fresco, I think is the term. And you can go get a bean burrito and have it with lots of veggies, lettuce, tomatoes, things like that. All right, so the last thing here that I want to wrap up on before we conclude is we want to avoid environmental chemicals. So to Ron's point earlier, being in the chemical industry, there's a lot of chemicals that do a lot of good. However, we are not supposed to be exposed to as many chemicals as we are nowadays. All right, so here's something we have to understand. One of the best ways to avoid toxins are to not eat meats. Unfortunately, when the animals, from their feed and from the water they drink and from the ground that they live on, essentially they're exposed to a lot of chemicals. And the chemicals bioaccumulate in the fat. So when we eat a big piece of steak, that fat that we're chewing and sucking on because it has amazing flavor, it's full of toxins because of the way that cow was raised and the things it was exposed to. So it's important to understand that in our fat, in animal tissues, it bioaccumulates, which is why when you eat fish that are higher in the food chain, the bigger fish eat the smaller fish, and then the bigger fish eat them, the bigger fish eat them. So essentially what happens is the toxins that are in most fish, for example, it bioaccumulates. So the big fish now doesn't have just the little fish. It has all the toxins from that fish that it ate as well. And they bioaccumulate, but they're stored in our fat of our body, and they hang around for a while. And unfortunately, there's only two ways really to get rid of a lot of the toxins that are on humans. One is breastfeeding and one is childbirth. So consider that for a minute. We don't want to pass them on to our baby either. But unfortunately, those are the only two ways to get rid of a lot of these things. Otherwise, they just sit and they stay in our fat. When we do lose weight, oftentimes it's gonna break down the fat, and then these toxins can enter our bloodstream as they're being worked out, if and when they are able to be worked out. We want to favor organic foods. Now, we don't eat all organic foods because, quite frankly, we eat a ton of produce and it's expensive. So what you have to consider here is just be mindful and eat organic where you can. If you have a budget that you can afford organic food all the time, then that is a good thing. Oftentimes what you'll notice there is that it might spoil a little quicker, but bottom line, we want foods that spoil. We want foods that spoil because we know that it has less preservatives and it's more healthful for us. But we want to go through and consider the things that, especially the foods that we eat the skin. Okay, like for example, you don't have to worry as much about the pesticides on a watermelon if you wash the watermelon before you cut it and you eat the inside. It's not as big of a problem. But things like a strawberry, where you're eating the skin and it has the pores that some chemicals can end up in, it's a big deal. Things like an apple. Apples are very treated with pesticides, so that's something to consider, the fact that you want to make sure you wash your apple very well as best you can. Now, here's another thing. Favor fresh or frozen fruits over canned. Canned foods are certainly convenient. They're easy. When in doubt, we certainly have our shelves stocked with them that, when in doubt, you can open some can of beans, some can of tomatoes, and have that with something that's quick and easy. But what we have to understand here is that we want to go through and have frozen and fresh as much as possible. Like Ron mentioned earlier, and we started to talk about, was foods like, or chemicals like BPA. Now, there are a lot of BPA-free cans and products. So when in doubt, look at your cans. And I sometimes challenge myself. I quickly go for the cheapest beans or the cheapest canned goods. And what I'm not really considering is, are they BPA free? So I'm trying to be conscious more now to say, is it BPA free? So my wife just made chili yesterday and she had a lot of cans, and I looked at all the bottoms of the cans And fortunately, most of them said BPA free. So that's a good thing. More and more companies are starting to go there. But bottom line, we have to consider the fact that it's chemical exposure that we want to avoid as best we can. Things like beans, we want to go through and focus on the fact that we want to, I mean, it's incredible. I was in Walmart this morning buying beans and rice and certain things. And I mean, it's incredible that you can get a bag of beans for $1. Like, it's incredible that you can cook for, a couple, you can cook beans one day and you have enough beans for the next 2 days. And it's $1. It's incredibly beneficial. It's high in fiber, high in so many beneficial things. But it also helps you be free from the chemicals that may or may not be in the canned products and the chemicals that they use with them. To Ron's comment earlier, which was perfect, was be mindful that it might say BPA free or it's edible to use for food or whatever it might be, but you don't want to heat these things up. You don't want to heat up plastic. You absolutely don't want to do that. And even if it says microwave safe, you need to say it's not safe for me. It's safe for the microwave, not safe for me. Use glass containers as best you can. And then any plastic products, really, you want to look and see that they're BPA free. And I found this out. I had never known this before in the book, but it says that if you look at the container, if it has the recycling number, if it has a 3 or a 7, it states that it may or may not have BPA. So something to be mindful of. I'm not trying to make your grocery shopping 5 hours, but needless to say, just be mindful, and you'll start to see some themes there that some products might have some things that are beneficial. Next thing is drink clean water. So when it comes to our water consumption, water is essential. We need to consume water. All right. We can only go 1 to maybe 3 days without water before we will not be alive. All right. Water is essential, but here's the deal. We want good quality water. So here's some tips that they had for water was that spring water beats tap water. However, if you are using tap water, you can clean it with certain filters or certain water systems. So for example, at our house, my wife would always say that our water tastes like blood, which is just fun to hear all the time. But needless to say, we ended up getting a water system, and it removes all the iron. It removes a lot of the different chemicals that might be sprayed from our neighbors, pesticides, herbicides, whatever it might be. They have really pretty green grass, but we're drinking their chemicals. If you have a water system that can clean those toxins out, it might be a good investment. And then if you do drink water bottles, be mindful not to leave them in your car, especially when it can get hot. Because a lot of the research is showing that when the plastic is heated, to Ron's example earlier, the BPA seeps into the water. Okay, so it makes the water that you then drink. So if you have a 90-degree day and then the next day it's 70 and you're like, oh, I have a water here, you want a water? That person drinks that water, it's full of more chemicals as a result of the heating, the cooking of the plastic, essentially. To Ron's comment earlier about thermal receipts, not that you go to a gas station or Giant or wherever and you're like, oh, that's a thermal receipt. But what you have to be mindful of is just the fact that there's some research showing that even things like receipts and other products may have additives that you have to be mindful. So don't sit there and hold your receipt and rub it and read it, right? Like, put it down and wash your hands. I don't know that it's really going to change my life really, but when they say you want a receipt, I'm going to say, no, burn it. No, I'm kidding. But basically, you're just going to try to be like, okay, no, I don't need a receipt. No, thank you. And then the last thing here that they had was look for personal care products. So even things like deodorants, shampoos, conditioners, lotions, be mindful of the chemicals that are in there. They might help give you moisture or help your skin or help your hair or whatever. But keep in mind that one of the largest organs in the body is our skin. Our skin has the ability to absorb chemicals. So if we're shampooing or conditioner, or I think it was called Brazilian blowout years ago. It had all kinds of chemicals and it was like amazing for women's hair, but it had all kinds of chemicals that actually had a lot of adverse effects for females. But when it comes to all these different things, what I want to say is look for you at what matters. Look at your life, look at your health, and consider what are some things that you can do to really minimize some of these things. But I want to ask you guys, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming, but I want to ask everybody, what are some questions that you may have, or what are some themes that you noticed from what we talked about today? What were some themes that you noticed, all in all, for all the different areas? Does anybody want to share?